The text came at 7:42 on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping coffee in a glass-walled office overlooking downtown Chicago, watching the sunrise catch the mirrored windows of the towers across the street, when my phone buzzed. A family group chat I'd muted months ago lit up my screen. Step back from the family. That was all it said. No greeting, no explanation. Just those 5 words, stamped with my father's name at the top. I stared at it longer than I should have, the heat from my coffee cooling in my hands. For years I had practiced this, keeping my face smooth, my shoulders straight, like the silk blouse I wore was armor. In this city, people saw only what you chose to show. And what I showed was composure. But inside, something cracked. Not because I hadn't expected distance, they'd been pushing me out for years, but because of the blunt finality.
Step back.
Like I was a stranger at their door. 2 days later, the real blow landed. A letter from my bank, crisp and clinical, slipped through my mail slot. I opened it standing barefoot in my kitchen, the tile cold against my skin. A $70,000 loan. In my name. The laugh that escaped me sounded hollow, almost cruel, as if my body didn't know whether to scream or collapse. Betrayal had a price tag now, and it was sitting right in my lap. I wasn't always this composed. If you rewind 5 years, you'd find me standing in the middle of my parents' living room in Ohio, my suitcase zipped and trembling at my feet. My mother sat stiff on the floral couch, her hands folded like pressed paper, while my father leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You think you're smarter than us, Emily?" My father's voice had that sharp, clipped edge I knew too well. "Running off to Chicago with nothing but some degree and big dreams? You'll come crawling back." My throat was tight, but my hands shook worse than my voice. "I'm not crawling anywhere. I just want to build a life that's mine." The silence that followed was heavier than shouting. My mother's eyes darted to the carpet, as though if she didn't meet my gaze, she could pretend none of this was happening. When I reached for her hand, she pulled away like I was contagious. That rejection, soft, quiet, and devastating, burned deeper than any words. In my pocket, I clutched something small, a silver bracelet my grandmother had given me before she passed. "For courage," she had whispered when she slipped it into my palm. "You'll need it when the people closest to you don't understand." That bracelet dug into my skin as my father delivered the final blow. "If you walk out that door, Emily, don't expect this family to be here when you fall." The sting of it made my eyes blur, but I lifted my chin anyway. I wasn't brave. I was terrified, but I stepped over the threshold with my suitcase in one hand and my grandmother's bracelet in the other. The door clicked shut behind me, final and cold. Outside, the night air bit at my cheeks, but for the first time, I could breathe. I didn't know then how lonely it would be. How many nights I'd cry into a pillow that smelled like a cheap laundromat, or how silence in a rented studio could feel like punishment. But I also didn't know that buried inside that loneliness was the seed of something else, something stronger than I had ever been allowed to imagine. I walked away shaking, but I walked away. And that was the beginning. Chicago did not welcome me with open arms. It greeted me with sirens, rent checks that nearly broke me, and the gnawing ache of being entirely, terrifyingly on my own. My first apartment was a shoebox with peeling paint and a radiator that hissed like an angry cat. I ate peanut butter on stale bread more nights than I'd like to admit, sometimes whispering to myself just to fill the silence. On the worst days, when exhaustion and doubt clawed at me, I'd turn the silver bracelet on my wrist and remember my grandmother's words. For courage. Courage didn't mean I felt brave. It meant I kept going. I worked 2 jobs at first. Mornings at a cafe, where the smell of burnt espresso clung to my clothes, and evenings as an assistant at a tiny marketing agency run out of a basement. That's where I met Diane. She was in her 50s, sharp as glass, but with a warmth that snuck up on you. She caught me one night, head on the desk, surrounded by mock-up designs I couldn't get right. "Emily," she said, sliding a cup of chamomile tea across the table. "You've got something. You just don't know it yet. Stay with it." Her belief became the light I clung to. Under Diane's mentorship, I learned how to pitch, how to handle rejection without folding, how to walk into a room and make people listen even when my voice trembled. The wins were small at first. My first solo project brought in just $500, but I treated it like a trophy. My first client wrote me a thank you email, so I printed it out and taped it to my fridge. Slowly, the shoebox apartment filled with signs of progress. A better laptop, secondhand furniture that didn't collapse under me, groceries that weren't just instant noodles. I built a portfolio, then a reputation. Diane introduced me to people who mattered, and for the first time, I saw a version of myself that wasn't a runaway disappointment. She was a builder, a creator, a woman who could stand on her own. Meanwhile, my family knew almost nothing. On social media, I posted sunsets over the lake, cups of coffee on rainy mornings, vague captions like grateful for the little things. I avoided sharing my work or my growing success. Part of me feared they'd dismiss it, or worse, claim it for themselves. Another part, the deeper, rawer part, still longed for their approval, even if it never came. Years blurred together, but the struggle turned into strength. I rented a bigger apartment with light streaming through wide windows. I opened my own small firm, just me and one employee at first, and signed my first six-figure contract. I celebrated alone, champagne bubbles prickling my nose, tears wetting my cheeks. I didn't announce it to my family. I didn't say a word, because by then, I had learned something crucial. Sometimes the silence that protects you is louder than any applause. When the bank confirmed the loan had been opened fraudulently under my name, I already knew who had done it. Family. No stranger would have had access to my social security number. No outsider could have pulled it off with such confidence. But instead of confronting them through calls or messages, I let silence stretch. Weeks later, the silence broke, not by me, but by them. My parents showed up in Chicago. No warning, no apology. Just appeared in the lobby of my office building, their presence announced by a startled receptionist who buzzed me with a voice that cracked. "Emily, your parents are here?" For a moment, my stomach flipped like I was 21 again, suitcase at my feet. Then I caught my reflection in the glass door of my office. Tailored blazer, steady eyes, my grandmother's bracelet catching the light. I wasn't that girl anymore. "Send them up," I said. When the elevator doors opened, they stepped into a world they had never imagined for me. The office was sleek, walls lined with framed awards and photographs of campaigns I had led. A floor-to-ceiling window washed the room in gold afternoon light. On my desk, fresh lilies filled the air with their quiet fragrance. Every detail whispered success, not boastful, but undeniable. My father's eyes darted everywhere, cataloging, calculating. My mother's lips parted slightly, as if she couldn't reconcile the daughter she dismissed with the woman standing before her. "So this is yours?" my father asked finally, his voice low. "Yes," I answered simply. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it stretch, heavy and awkward, until it pressed against them. They shifted uncomfortably in the leather chairs across from me. My mother smoothed her skirt. My father cleared his throat. It was almost comical. The power dynamic had flipped and they knew it. Finally, I slid a folder across the desk. Inside were the documents, proving the $70,000 loan. My name forged, my credit tangled. "You came all this way. I assume you know why." My mother flinched. My father's jaw tightened. Neither denied it. "I built all of this without you," I said quietly, gesturing around the office. "Every late night, every client, every dollar, I did it alone. And after everything, you thought you could still use me." The silence that followed was thick with shame. My father's pride didn't let him apologize, but his eyes flickered with something I had never seen before, uncertainty. My mother's fingers twisted the strap of her purse, her gaze fixed on the lilies as if they could save her. I leaned forward, folding my hands. My voice was calm, steady, but carried the weight of years unsaid. "I am not your safety net. I am not your scapegoat. You told me to step back from the family. I listened. But now you've stepped into my world, and here, you don't get to set the rules." The words hung there, and for the first time, I watched my father sink back in his chair, small in a way I'd never witnessed. I let them sit with it. I wanted them to see every inch of the woman they thought would crawl back broken. Instead, they were staring at someone they no longer had power over. And I realized something, standing there with the city's skyline burning behind me. This was my moment. Not revenge. Not even justice. Just truth. I let the silence linger until the ticking of the wall clock became the only sound. My father, once the loudest voice in any room, avoided my eyes. My mother pressed her lips into a thin line, fighting the urge to cry. "I'm not here to humiliate you," I said finally, my voice low but unshakable. "I'm here to set terms. If you want any place in my life moving forward, there are conditions." My father bristled, but the truth was, he had no leverage left. Not here. Not in this office built from every ounce of grit they once mocked. "First," I continued, sliding the loan papers back toward them, "this debt doesn't disappear on its own. It gets cleared every cent, and it doesn't come out of my pocket. If you sign my name, you can fix the mess you created. That's non-negotiable." My father's jaw clenched, but he nodded once, stiff and small. "Second," I said, my gaze shifting to my mother, "there will be no more silence. No more pretending things didn't happen. If you want a relationship with me, honesty is the price. Even if it hurts. Especially if it hurts." Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, she didn't look away. She gave the faintest nod. "Third," I said, leaning back in my chair, "respect my independence. I built this life on my own terms. I won't shrink myself to fit into the version of me you once wanted. If you want me in your family, you accept me as I am now." The words landed with a quiet finality. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. My father looked as though he'd swallowed something sharp. I softened, just slightly. "I don't hate you. I never have. But I refuse to live in the old patterns anymore. If you want to stay in my orbit, you rise with me. No more dragging me back." For the first time, my father's shoulders sagged, the fight slipping out of him. He gave a slow, almost reluctant nod. My mother whispered, "We'll try," her voice cracked but sincere. I believed her, not fully, not blindly, but enough. "Good," I said, standing, the city's skyline blazing behind me. "Then we start there." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It was accountability. It was me taking the power they'd tried to strip away and turning it into something solid, something unshakable. For the first time in years, I felt the ground beneath me wasn't just steady, it was mine. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. My parents didn't transform overnight into the kind of people I once wished they'd been. But small things began to shift. My father called the bank. I didn't hear the conversation, but I received a letter weeks later confirming the fraudulent loan had been closed, the debt wiped from my record. For a man who had built his whole identity on never admitting fault, that was his first crack in the armor. My mother started sending messages. Not the vague, shallow texts of before, but small admissions. "I miss you. I'm proud of what you've built. I'm sorry I wasn't stronger when you needed me." They weren't everything, but they were something. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the lost daughter banging on a locked door. I felt like the woman I had fought to become. Whole, steady, unapologetically myself. One night, I sat by the window of my apartment. The city stretched out beneath me in a sea of lights. I turned the silver bracelet on my wrist, the one my grandmother had given me all those years ago. For courage, she'd said. Back then, I thought courage meant walking away. Now, I understood it meant so much more. Courage was staying true to myself when the people I loved most tried to tear me down. It was building something from nothing and then standing firm when they came to take it. I closed my eyes and breathed in the quiet strength of that truth. The family I once begged for acceptance from would never fully understand my journey.
But I didn't need them to.
The only approval I needed was already pulsing through my own steady heartbeat. I had stepped back from the family when they told me to. And in that space, I found myself. Now, if they wanted to step forward again, it would be on my terms. I smiled faintly, the bracelet cool against my skin, and whispered to the empty room as if narrating my own story. I am not who you left behind. I am who I chose to become.